Good morning. Welcome here. So today what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about functions. Now, you might ask yourself, what is a function? Well, a function is simply a collection of code that does something. So for example, if we wanted to define a number in an array, we might go find number in array. That could be our function. Now you might ask yourself, why would we make a function? Well, let's say we have a program that needs to find a number in an array multiple times. If we need to just find it once, we could just write the for loop to find the number and be done with it. But if we have to do it 10, 20, 30 times, you're not going to want to write that code over and over and over again. So what C# does, like most object-oriented programming languages do, is they allow us to have functions. And most programming languages in general allow us to have functions. All right, so a function is basically just a way to do a certain task over and over and over again. It's a way to automate it. All right, so what we're going to do is we are going to create an array, which we have here, and we're going to use a function to see if we can find a number in it. Now, we've worked with functions before, you might not even know it. Right here, static void main string square brackets args, that is a function. All right, that's our main function. Now, what we have here is we have an array. Int array, it's of size 10, I've given it the values or initialized it. Now what I want to do is I want to write a function. Now a function has a couple different parts to it. Now, what I would suggest you do is you go to your notes and you read through this function section. Okay, it gives it a lot of information on what we need and what we should be doing. So, what we need to do first of all, whenever working with a function, is we need to decide what type of accessibility we want it to have. So, do we want only this class to see it? So, by class, what I mean is if you see these open curly brackets, this is the class program. Now we can have multiple classes. That's a very strong tool that we're able to use in Visual C#. And that's the big idea behind object-oriented programming languages, is that you can have different classes and different objects. All right, so everything in between these brackets is in the class program. We're going to get onto classes and how to make them and all that later on. So all we need to know is that these are within the class program. Now if I just start writing code here, unless it's declaring a variable, I'm going to start to get errors. Like if I go like if array 1 at 3 equals 4, and I try to write code in here, what you're going to notice here is I get a ton of errors. And it's like, what are you doing? I don't know what to do. All right. So that's because we can't just write code in classes. We need to put them in functions. So the first thing we need to know is we need to know the accessibility type. So do we want only this class to be able to see it? Do we want other classes to be able to see it? So when we make a copy of this program class, do we want someone else to be able to see it, access it, change it, modify it, all that type of stuff? All right. So typically what we have is for every variable we make, we have getters and setters in a class, so that you can change or retrieve the variable. Then within that class, all the functions we make, we probably want to make them private, because we don't want people to be able to change things. All right, so it's for code security and that type of stuff. Because let's say you're making a game and it has weapons and enemies in it. You don't want your enemy to be able to access your weapon and change it on you. That wouldn't be good. All right, so the accessibility types that we are going to talk about mainly are public and private. There are some other types like protected, but we're not going to really get into that. We're either going to use public or private. So if you want anyone to be able to see it, use public. If you only want this class or everything in between these two brackets to be able to see it, use private. So that's the first part. So we're going to say private. Now, the next thing we're going to put is a return type. So what are the return types? It's basically any object type. So it can be an int, it can be a string, it can be a Boolean. Let's say you made something with weapons. It could be a type of weapon. It could be a bad guy. It could be anything you want. All right. So for this one here, we're going to make it a Boolean. Okay, why a Boolean? Because we want it to return either true or false. Yes, you found the number. No, you didn't find the number. So the next thing we have here is we have the name. So let's go find num in array. All right, so that's the name. That can be anything you want. Now, typically what it will say is it wants this to be a capital F. All right. One thing I forgot to mention here, if your array just does work and it doesn't find anything, like let's say, or it doesn't return anything, then you would want this to be void. So void means it does work, but it doesn't return anything. So it doesn't give you back a value, it just does work. The next part are the parameters. So this is what you're going to send it. So in this example here, what we're going to do is we're going to send it an array. So we go int array, it's called A, and we're going to go int num to find. All right. So those are parameters. Do you need to have parameters? No. If I made this array up here and I made it a public or private array, could I access it down here? Absolutely, because anything I make up here or in between functions, I can access within the functions. But again, what you want to do here is, let's say I made this array up here instead, so I can cut it from there and paste it in here. Now I would take this out of here because I no longer need to be given that array. I have it that I can work with here. I would just have to make this a private or a public. Now, why would I want to do that? Again, I would do it because I don't want other programs to be able to change my array directly. I want them to have to go through the way that I've designed the program. All right, so I'll let them change it, but I want them to use my functions to be able to change it. So now I'm getting an error here because it says basically not all code paths return a value. What does that mean? Well, I have a Boolean here, so it's saying, hey, you need to return either true or false. If you don't return true or false, it's an error because you said that. What you'll notice here is if I go void, the error disappears. Why? Because again, void means we're not returning anything. So let's go back to Boolean. Okay, so in Boolean here, or in the find number in array, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make a Boolean variable. Boolean, let's set it to false. Boolean is found equals false. Okay, so what I'm going to do is this value here is going to be either true or false depending on if I found the number they were looking for or not. Then what I have to do is I have to have a return value. Since this is not void, I need to return something. I'm going to write return is found. Now what you'll notice, the error that was here disappeared because I returned a variable, or I returned a Boolean. So now what I have to do is I have to search the array to see if I can find it. All right, so if I go for int I equals 0, I is less than array1 dot length. Now I can get access to array1 because it is out here. Okay, I plus plus, so that's my loop. Now I go if num to find equals array1 at I. Well, then I found it. It is found, so I would go is found equals true. Now I could put an else there and say else if found equals false, but it's already false, so I don't need to do it over again. All right, so once it's found, it's going to be set to true. It's never going to be set to false again. All right, now one thing here, this here is a pointer to the variable that I'm going to send it. All right, so it's this num to find, I can use it within here, but I can't use it anywhere else. Okay, it's just accessible within this function. So now what I can do here is I can go like this. Let's do a console, or let's go if find no. Oh, this is gonna have to be a static because this is a static here. Num an array, and this will also have to be a static. We'll get to what it means, what static means in a little bit. Don't worry about that right now. Just realize that if you're working in a console app, that this and this. All right, so we'll discuss static again later. I don't know what it means, but just realize, yeah, again, if this is static, if you're working in console, this is static, so all these have to be static also. All right, so find num in array, and let's give it a number. So I do the curly brackets. Let's see, is there a number 6 in there? All right. So what this is going to do is this is going to return either true or false. So that's why I'm not getting an error here, because this is a Boolean. So when I call this find num in array, find num in array 6, what this does is this takes the 6, it gives it to this function here. All right. then this number, this variable here contains a 6 now, and it's going to go through the array and check to see if there's a 6. Console.writeLine, and I'll go, there is a 6. Okay, then I can go if find num in array, let's go 100. I can go console.writeLine, there is a 100. Then I can go else console.writeLine, there is no 100. All right, and I can do an else here, else console.writeLine, there is no 6. All right, and then I just do a console.read key here, console.read key. So when I start it, what should happen is this console.writeLine, there's a 6 should appear, and there should be no 100. Let's hope this works. Now compiles, takes forever to compile. Let's see, boom, there we go. And look, it says there's a 6, there's no 100. All right, so it worked. So what this does is every time we call this function here, every time we call find num in array, it goes to here, it gives it the number, the 6 value here, and it runs this code. So every time we call the function, it runs the code that's within the function. So this is a way that we can really save a lot of code, because instead of having to repeat code over and over again, copy and pasting and changing things, we can just write a function, and then we can call the function again and again and again. All right, so just a couple things to go over again. You have the accessibility type of the function, private or public. Private, only the stuff within the class that it's written for can see it. Public, anyone can see it. Then again, if we're doing a console app and we're using the main function and it's a static, all our functions that want to access the main or work with the main also have to be static. Okay, but don't worry about this, we'll talk about this later on. Then we have our return type. All right, so you can be any type you want. If you don't have a type, it's going to be void. Okay, then you have the name. And this is anything you want. Make sure it's easy to understand name and is useful and is descriptive. Then what we have here is we have parameters. You could have something, you might not have anything. If you don't have any parameters here, you just simply have 2 brackets that are empty. So it would just be like this here if we were not going to do anything. All right. Then if this is not void, you need to have a return statement. Now what you could do is you could have multiple return statements. So I could put a return in here and say return true, and then else return false. But try to only have one return statement per function. Okay, it just keeps it a little bit neater, keeps it a little bit cleaner, and it's a little bit easier to debug. And then what you have here is you have all your statements within your code. All right, so that is functions. Please, again, make sure you read through the notes, you check them out, you read through them. If you have any questions, make sure you ask. All right, have a good day, guys.